people made it the world's largest city, perpetually sat on the edge of anarchy while its imperial frontiers demanded constant attention. An objective observer might wonder whether one man, even one as skilled as Augustus, could really run so complicated a state. With its seemingly endless problems, Rome's empire under Augustus might, by rights, look like a failed political experiment in autocracy. Surely, a citizen of a modern republic might assume, Romans would quickly abandon autocracy and return to the representative republic under which Roman elites had shared power with one another for nearly 500 years. This is how we, who have lived all of our lives under younger representative democracies, have been trained to think about freedom. But the traumas of those years did not, in fact, push Romans back toward the familiar political structures of the Republic. Instead, most Romans seem to have craved the power and authority of Augustus even more. In 22 BC, the Roman mob that threatened to burn the Senate House also sought to force Augustus to accept the title of dictator, although he already possessed supreme power in the empire. The 3rd century Roman historian Cassius Dio wrote that the electoral violence of 21 BC showed clearly that it was impossible for a democratic government to be maintained among Romans. And when Augustus returned to the city in 19 BC, the same author wrote, "There was no similarity between the conduct of people during his absence, when they quarreled, and when he was present. Augustus's presence alone calmed the chaos of Rome and its empire." But Dio added a caveat. Augustus placated Romans only because they were afraid. Order came to chaos only when freedom was exchanged for fear. Augustus himself explained the transition from republic to empire very differently. Although Romans had long held that political domination by one individual represented the opposite of liberty, Augustus framed his autocratic control of the Roman state as a sort of democratic act. In Augustus's conception, he had restored liberty, libertas, to Rome by first delivering the Roman world from the senators who had seized power by murdering Julius Caesar, and by later eliminating the threat of foreign control posed by Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony. Liberty, as Augustus and his supporters saw it, meant the freedom from domestic unrest and foreign interference that came only with the security and political stability that Augustus provided. Augustus's liberty meant that Roman property rights remained valid. It opened economic opportunities to new segments of the Roman population, and it took control of the city and its empire away from an increasingly corrupt senatorial elite whose mismanagement had led to civil war. In the 20s BC, many Romans agreed with Augustus that liberty could not exist if insecurity persisted. They came to believe that freedom from oppression could only exist in a polity controlled by one man. This book explains why Rome, still one of the longest-lived republics in world history, traded the liberty of political autonomy for the security of autocracy. It is written at a moment when modern listeners need to be particularly aware of both the nature of republics and the consequences of their failure. We live in a time of political crisis, when the structures of republics as diverse as the United States, Venezuela, France, and Turkey are threatened. Many of these republics are the constitutional descendants of Rome, and as such, they have inherited both the tremendous structural strengths that allowed the Roman Republic to thrive for so long and some of the same structural weaknesses that led eventually to its demise. This is particularly true of the United States, a nation whose basic constitutional structure was deliberately patterned on the idealized view of the Roman Republic presented by the 2nd century BC author Polybius. This conscious borrowing from Rome's model makes it vital for all of us to understand how Rome's republic worked, what it achieved, and why, after nearly 5 centuries, its citizens ultimately turned away from it and toward the autocracy of Augustus. No republic is eternal. It lives only as long as its citizens want it. And in both the 21st century AD and the 1st century